towards what they call the World Bank standards for relocation, universal standards, if I'm correct. And they said that they adhere to those standards, and that they, according to those standards, that there was no cultural or any form of violation that were identified. I mean, that were picked up, or that they could be found to have infringed, or rights that they could be found to have infringed. But also this connects as well, to what the argument we are trying to make here. That whatever the standards may be, I think Adrian spoke about property and the Constitution. The Constitution does make provision, and then there is an act which is renewed everywhere, the IBIRA, Interim Protection of Informal Property Rights, I think. And through that, I think that that could be invoked in cases like this where people are going to be removed from land, because I think that act covers the question of the issue of customary property rights. And I don't think those standards that the mine applied took into consideration the informal property, the so-called informal property rights that had to be protected in line with the Constitution and the IBIRA Act.
Right, so thank you for that. So we have enough time for just one last set of questions. I saw kindly, was there anybody else? And 3 as well, and 4. Okay, well, since there's 4, can you keep them fairly short? You can ask, but we'll get to you. So it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, okay? And please remember to say who you are and speak clearly. But just before we have those questions, just a couple of notices. Continuing the mining theme in SWOP's work, we have 2 other events coming up shortly. So actually on the 25th of this month, that's next Tuesday, right here on Tuesday between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, SWOP is going to be hosting the launch of a new report on the state of black economic empowerment in the post-apartheid mining industry by Duma Ngule, who's one of the leading commentators on BE in the mining industry. And responding to Duma's report are going to be Carol Patton, the Deputy Editor of Business Day, and Mbuliseni Ndlozi, the National Spokesperson for the EFF. So that's not one to miss. And the title of the event, by the way, is going to be Radical Economic Transformation versus White Monopoly Capital, the case of the mining industry. So please come along and get involved in that debate. You'll see the posters around the campus. And then secondly, continuing in the SWOP Breakfast series, we'll be launching another working paper on the relationship between Longmen and the Bako-Bamahale traditional community on the northwest, going back to the northwest again near Rustenburg. And of course that's where the Marikana massacre happened in August 2012. But there's an interesting story, hidden voices to be heard as well, about the longer term relationship between that mining company and the local community which hosts its operations. So that will be on the 26th of May at the same time in the same place. Okay, so Sakani, if you would like to start, please.
Okay, my name is Sakani. I'm going back to the issue of resistance. My question is, it's something that basically is coming back. In other words, it's kind of like disposition, community disposition reloaded in a way. In your research, did you find any parallels with colonial and apartheid era kind of like dispositions? And right now, post-apartheid, what are the dynamics thereof? And what is the government's reaction to that with regards to how the community reacts to it and how it's affected? And then my other question is, you spoke of inclusion and exclusion with regards to identities. Were you referring to identities in terms of like within the household, who gets benefit and who is left out, or were you relating it to community inclusion and exclusion? Thanks.
Thank you. Please remember to say who you are and where you're from.
My name is Mokopane and I'm doing my honors in sociology. My question is, obviously the mining companies have reduced the community's survival capabilities. It seems there's no ongoing relationship with the mines and the communities, and why. Are there no CSR representatives from the mining companies on the ground working with these communities? For example, with something that you brought up, who then is responsible with implementing or finding or planning alternative livelihoods? Livelihoods for the community members.
Thank you.
I think Sonwabile, what you presented is very definitive of the way coloniality actually manifests itself. Because I think it will kind of commodify nature, which is coloniality of nature. And it will go on to kind of use power to force people to dehumanize them in the coloniality of being. But having said that, what I think research is done so that it informs certain interventions. And what you've presented can be upscaled to the current problems that we find ourselves confronted with nationally. And having said that, that is kind of how coloniality actually manifests itself. Post-apartheid is still there. So what do you think, from probably your findings and the research point of view, would be the relevance of the current political core or economic radical economic transformation? How do you think it will be relevant to actually liberate those who are dispossessed the way you found them?
My name is Manis from Brazil. Actually, I was trying to follow up on the question they asked, which must it be addressed about the traditional authorities. But I would like to add to that question the state and what conclusions are we meant to draw from a web of actors who act in complicity against the interests of people. So, what conclusion? I'm not saying everybody can answer the question, but we have to direct it to yourself. It's everybody's responsibility to think, what does this mean? In terms of how we should view the state, how we should view traditional authorities, and how we should view capitalism. The last part comment is that to what extent is there sufficient circulation of this information, of this research, into the different organs of people's organizations, society, communities, and how can we, bring back the kind of scholarship that you are helping us to develop into the mainstream of people's organizations and struggles.
We've got a lot of questions, and please remind us if there's one that we're missing. I think I'll connect yours to the first question that Farai asked.
And can everyone hear okay?
No. Oh, can you?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe if you both use the mic. Sorry, I shouldn't say that.
Oh, right now. How many things were said and you didn't hear? And we profoundly apologize. We send us emails afterwards. But the question of the form resistance take is very much connected to the role played by traditional authorities. The traditional authorities have become mediators between mining companies and rural communities and the so-called custodians of African property. so and together with the state. So, and as such, many deals and agreements between mining capital and communities are signed unilaterally by traditional authorities without substantial consultation with the people. And that is why resistance quite often is targeted at both the mine and the traditional authority. I mean, the resistance, I mean, the protest that we highlighted earlier in Mokopane, in Peril, also included a situation where the chief's house was burnt and the property damaged as well. I mean, it happens every time. I mean, the anger of the people is often targeted, is often focused on traditional authorities. Partly one would argue, I mean, we've written about this in other forms, even academic papers. Would argue that this is rooted in the process of what some have referred to as retribalization of Africans in the former homelands, where the state, through various pieces of legislation, have given power over traditional authorities over the same boundaries that the apartheid apartheid government established in the 1950s, and give them more power and less accountability measures about the people's property. And poorly defined, for instance, the whole question of community. If you look at the MBRGA and other acts, they don't really separate between the community that is closer to mine, about 50-kilometer radius, whatever, and property rights holders, you know, or the customary rights holders who need to be compensated, I mean, directly. You know, these are people who lose food, basic food, when mine take away their land. You know, I mean, access to food as we have shown. And then I think, I'll also talk about, I mean, this connects to your question about CSR representative and who engages with the mine. I think that this also connects to yours. I mean, the mines quite often directly engage with traditional authorities, although there are CSR representatives who goes to the, and maybe give a donation of school books or a library or school uniform to the impoverished children or whatever. I mean, those are very small paternalistic acts which we do not regard as any form of benefits, and communities don't, in fact. You know, and yeah, quite often they engage with the local headmen and ask them, and the youth, for instance, the work that Mokopane, for instance, is doing for his MA project, which is anxiously waiting for my last comments on, points out to how youth is marginalized in such processes, because these mine representatives will go to the Induna's place or the headman's place and involve a few elders about what is to be done. And by and large, young people don't get involved or don't get to participate in such projects. And yeah, I think the question, let me just take the question of radical economic transformation, although now in my mind I'd forgotten about it. What was the radical economic transformation about? Or what do we say in light of our findings about the new, about the banning discourse on radical economic transformation? I think, you know, this morning I just read the news and I saw that the Land Bank is giving R1 billion during the 2017-2018 period to any black commercial agricultural interests or corporation, you know, as a loan. But they've also mentioned, shockingly, that over the past couple of years, since 2008, they've only, they've given 40 billion, almost 40 billion rand to loan, worth of loan, and to agricultural commercial interests. But only less than 2 billion was given to commercial interests that had some form of black ownership in it. So the whole question of radical economic transformation is neither here nor there. I mean, we still need to engage in it and understand, because Would you say 1 billion after 10 years? We have given 40 billion in 10 years, and then after 10 years we give 1 billion to like. It's a radical transformation at the time we're talking about. But I think this also points out that there's a lot. We have to go a significantly long way. Yeah, the question of inclusion and exclusion. I think Sakana that asked. I think maybe Farai can talk on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Sonwabile. So, how this unfolds in Mokopane, we have these two traditional authority areas which don't have they are not uniform in terms of their ethnicity. And one of the things, since platinum became this highly sought after mineral and lots of benefits especially in terms of elite capture, traditional leaders getting a huge slice of mining benefits. There are some communities which are not, in a way, the minority, because we have the Pedi, the Ndebele, the Tsonga people in these two traditional authority areas. And in Kegana, for instance, there is a contestation on who benefits from mining, because seemingly the chief is Ndebele. They are of the view that these are not the legitimate owners of the land, the Tsonga people who are residing in that area. And in fact, they've been chased away to that part of the area because it was infertile and suitable for human habitation and agriculture. It's quite rocky, but now it is minerals, and already now things about who is who. They're coming up, but who is the legitimate owner by way of ethnic belonging, who is the rightful, who has the right to benefit from platinum mining. But also because, like what Sonwabile is saying, that the definition, community means anything in terms of the MPRGA, anything you can say this is the community in the way that you want to define it. So the boundaries are so fluid. That's why the mine can only say we've employed local labor. But when people who are right at the next to the mine say we don't have jobs, so then what that causes is some resentment amongst locals. But actually, the people who have jobs, mostly those few temporary jobs, are not directly affected by mining activity, environmental impacts, and so on, loss of land. They are, yes, part of Kekana or Mapela, but they might not have lost land or have suffered the way we have since we are right next to the mine. So those contestations are featured in our research. Yeah.
So thank you very much again to Sonwabile and to Farai for those fantastic presentations. Thank you to Popopo and Kaklafo for your role in this important research, and to Michelle Hay as well. Copies of the paper, the working paper, will be available outside. And if you do represent a community or some other organisation, you can take more than one to get more of them into circulation. And we hope to see you again on Tuesday, 2 o'clock, with Duma Bule, Carol Patton and Hussein Ndlozi to debate radical economic transformation versus white monopoly capital in the mining industry.